Today is a bonus day. It's actually a double bonus day. And it starts like this.
Nobody aspires to be a manager.
And yet, so often, what pressures our time the most is management. In this bonus episode of Vacilando, Paul and I discuss the relationship between leadership and management with a focus on some telling moments from our careers. Wait, I said it was double bonus day. So at the end of this episode is a special preview of my first episode of Dear Stardust, which is available to download where you get your podcasts.
Nobody aspires to be a manager. Everybody aspires to be a leader. That's a little bit more, exciting and stuff like that. But you've got to manage. You've got to be able to get the practical stuff done. Luke made a comment like that, I think, in one of his very first reflection, the first reflection that he did. You've still got to make, he used the metaphor of being the mayor. But mayors still have to make sure things work. You're not just a symbolic representative. You do actually have to make things happen. Years ago, I did some work with a government department, and they were talking about not judging people. We're looking at a 360 instrument of performance, and this item there was about judging people. And I said, it's not about moral judgment. It's not saying that you're a better or a worse person, but we do that as principals every day. Yeah, this is good. This is not good. We need to do better at that. We need to do more of that. We need to do less of that. They are questions of judgment, and that becomes an important feature of the way that you do your work. It's not if you're turning up to your class late every lesson, Mr. Murphy, I'm going to judge that. And I'm going to come and say, Michael, we need to have a conversation about your professional responsibility. That is indeed the work of leadership, but it's done through management. And you can't divorce those two things. They're symbiotic.
Mm. I can hear people already having a retort to that, which is, well, actually, no, what you need to do is to work out why that person's late. So you can't judge their professional responsibility until you try to understand why it is that they are turning up late every 5 minutes late to every lesson.
My retort to that retort, you and I have these periodically, is I haven't chipped you because you've done that twice. I've seen a pattern of it. And yeah, I do want to know what the pattern of it is. But I'd also like to think, from a bit of experience and some scars along the way, a regular pattern like that suggests that there's probably not something really quite deep and dark and sinister sitting underneath it. It's more likely to be that they're just not getting there on time. Now, you're quite right. I may be wrong. But the point is not actually being there late and that I have to chip them. The point is that I have to take a management decision to be an effective leader. And I can't simply go stand up, because, the worst, and you've probably experienced this, and some listeners will have experienced this, two people failed to turn up to things on time. And so the whole staff gets a berating about the professional courtesy and responsibility it is to be punctual to our classes and to release our students to go off to the day. Well, actually, that's not leadership at all, right? I should be able to come and say, Michael, is there something going on? What's happening here? Because I'm not going to talk to 100 staff and berate them all because they're going, well, I always turn up. I always do the right thing. Why do I feel like I'm being scolded when I'm not doing the wrong thing? The broadcasting of, discipline to staff is pretty ineffective and pretty poor.
Okay, I'm going to break the fourth wall here. Listeners, if you are at any level of leadership whatsoever, don't do that. Do not bring all staff together to criticize. The one that always gets me is the whole staff email that reminds people of the dress code. I've sat there in a 3-piece suit before and looked and gone, gosh, are my shoes are they not quite buffed enough? I'm reading through a fine-tooth comb trying to work out if it's me. There's someone in ripped jeans and a singlet next to me, but I'm like, well, it could be both of us. Maybe we're both dressed inappropriately for this. But the dress code one always comes up. It's like, for goodness sake, go and speak to someone.
Yeah.
Just have the conversation.
That's right. And a flip side of that is that leaders are often reluctant to do that because that's an uncomfortable thing, because of that whole attitude, well, we don't want to judge you. Well, next time I get onto a Qantas plane, I am unlikely ever to see, or Virgin or Jetstar, to see some, particularly unfortunately, it happens to be the female flight attendants with their hair dangling and flopping all over the place. Right? They always have them pulled back so that their eyebrows are, up in the top of their head, because that's the dress code that community has an expectation on. If I wander into, a five-star hotel, the bell porter, receptionist, the whatever, they are going to be dressed immaculately. Now, if you want to self-actualize and have whatever colours you want, knock your socks off. Don't apply for a job at the Intercontinental. Like, it's not the right place.
Yeah.
And so that's why often many leaders will go, oh, I don't want to upset Michael. I don't want to be seen to be judging or critical of Michael. So I'll send an all staff email and then it'll, cover a multitude of sins. And as you say, what it does is it actually makes other people feel nervous. It actually makes them feel like, if you've got something to say to me, come and say it. Otherwise, don't belt me. I'm not the one doing the wrong thing. And it's just a poor culture overall, and I would endorse your breaking of the fourth wall.
I think the thing that really stands out for me with I don't think it's the judgment thing personally. I think it is that people don't see that you build relationship capital in difficult conversations or challenging moments. I think they think that you're eroding it. But if I respect you enough to come up to you and say, Paul, I value your presence here and I need your professionalism to be here, and that we are actually going to build a stronger relationship through that process. If I believe that, then I'll have that conversation. If I believe that conversation is going to make our relationship worse, then I'm probably not going to have it. And I don't think it's about judgment.
No. One of the most difficult conversations I participated in was, I was a senior executive, and the then principal of the school came and said, I've got some difficult things for us to talk about. So they briefed me. And they opened up with, they rang me and said, I'm coming around to have a chat. And when they came into my office, they said, I haven't slept for 2 nights thinking about how I'm going to deal with this. I went, what? Okay. And, it was a difficult, uncomfortable, and at times confronting conversation. Right? Now, to this day, I would say that 80%, 85% of what we talked about was fair. I was not doing aspects of my job. I was not doing them the way that I'd said, or, there were things that I needed to hear about that. Right? But I'd never, in the entirety of my career, I'd never had a conversation like that with any supervisor. I didn't quite know how to respond. And so at the end of it, I said, oh, do I get to say something now, or should I come back? Yep, fine. Now, that'll be great. And I said, thanks. It was literally the first thing that came into my head. I said, thanks. I don't think I've ever had anybody lose sleep over how I'm doing my job. I don't actually quite know how to process that, because I think that shows that you actually do care about how I'm doing my job and want good things for me in the way that I do that. I reflected later on, was there some kind of manipulative thing that I was going for at that point? I don't think so. I genuinely kind of was dumbstruck that this extraordinary man, who's continued to be a mentor and friend in the years since, would be bothered enough to go, I'm anxious to make sure that this gets dealt with correctly. He nipped it in the bud. He came round, he got it done, but he stewed on some stuff before we came in and did it. At the end, it was terrific. The other thing that I would say about that is, and I would mention this to my senior exec when they were mentoring them along the way as well, the issue is never the difficult conversation. It's the follow-up cup of coffee. Whenever you have one of those conversations, You leave it at a particular point, and then you've got to come back and go, words that you expect me to say. How are you, Michael? How have we gotten to this point now? So it's not just actually the opening line. It's actually a framing lens for the way that we do the relationship work within schools. Yep, we can have a tough conversation. Yep, we can agree on some things, but I still got to be able to come back and carry on in relationship with you. And that's the follow-up cup of coffee.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's two there's two things I want to kind of add. The first one is the same conversation that you're talking about. That's happened once to me in my career, that someone has come up to me and said, you haven't done the job you should be doing. And I have the utmost respect for Rose Hood, because she said it to me. She was a teacher at the school, and I was a leader at that school. And she said, I've been thinking about this for 3 weeks. Similar kind of thing. I don't think she was sleepless about it, but she'd been thinking about it. And she said, you didn't, like, I have these expectations of you and you didn't reach them when that happened. And that was probably 12 years ago. And I still remember where we stood. I don't think that spot exists anymore because it's been replaced by a building at that particular school. But I still remember the moment vividly. And I have more respect for her than just about anyone else I've ever worked with for that reason, because I've stuffed up countless things that no one's called me out for.
Yep.
It's extraordinary just how meaningful that was for me. And I have endeavored to be that person for others. At times that borders on the self-righteous, but it's really important, I think.
It's a mindset of both parties. We've just finished the men's Tour de France, and the ladies are often riding at the moment. Those and any elite sports people, they actually want to be held to account for their performance because they want to improve. And there is this mentality that says, oh, no, we can't be critical. Teaching is such an individual pursuit, and, we're all our own special people. And, but I like the fact that someone else has got a different perspective. I love you to come into my class and go, oh, you did that. Can you tell me what that is about? And have you thought about it? Those things are really, really important that I'd have to say as a profession we're getting better at, but for many of us, it's not been the fabric of the way that our culture's been because of the sorts of things you talk about. We're unwilling to, I like your self-righteous sort of statement. I'll do that because that's the way I look. But I don't have to do it your way. I have to do it in an effective way. I've got to do it in a way that has impact, and it might be different. And we're different relational people. I can walk into a classroom and a whole bunch of kids love what I do, and I can tell you the names of the kids that don't, like that. And then you take over the same class, and the kids are going to be different, right? Some of them will really love what you do, and some of them will go, oh, here's Mr. Murphy again, let's get Mr. Kidson back, and vice versa, That I think is something that we can continue to work on, but only if we as the other party willingly accept that.
Yeah.
You heard what Rosa said because you had great esteem for her, I'm assuming.
I absolutely did. Infinitely more as a result of the conversation. And I held Rose in high regard, as you say. But when she came to tell me that, I imagine she probably thought it was going to strain our relationship. But to me, it made it stronger than I could ever imagine.
Yeah,
and
terrific.
Because we went through that moment, and we're bonded to that moment, and I believe in that, and I believe that the connection that those challenges kind of bring relationships closer. The second I guess story, and I'm possibly have spoken to you about this before, but I've gone through 2 extremely challenging performance management processes with staff. I've been through many more, but these were the 2 most challenging ones. One of them, every single step along the way, I started every meeting with, I want you to still be a teacher at this school, and this is how we're going to achieve it. The second one, I didn't want that. I didn't want that teacher still teaching there.
Mm.
And that's just such a fundamental difference that outside of the judgment kind of side that you're talking about, there are times when you might think, oh, that person who's 5 minutes late every time, if you as a principal don't want them to still be working at that school, you can say what you like. If it's built on that false pretense of, oh, I want to help you get better, blah, blah, blah. If you want them to leave, I think that's going to shine through in that management.
Mm. Yeah, and look, I mean, this is probably way off the reservation of where you wanted to be in this conversation, Michael. But the sporting analogy works again. Years and years ago, I was the deputy head of the school, and I was responsible for the curriculum. Sometimes they're responsible for welfare. I was the curriculum, and in the secondary school, I was the line manager for the heads of departments. And I was dealing with one head of department about a particular teacher who there were some incontrovertibly problematic issues. And this head of department burst out into a frustrated rage. And he said, I don't know what to do about it. You keep on telling me that I have to do that, but I don't know what to do about it. And I said, I'm happy to help you, but you have to first acknowledge that there's an issue there. And he almost burst into tears and said, I've known about it for some time. I just don't know what to do about it. And that's one of those moments where you kind of go, in coaching a sport team, we all get those kids who, because they have to be part of the team, but where can you put them where they're not a damage to themselves and they're not a damage to the overall pursuit of the team, right? And we all have a bit of a joke about that. All right, well, whose parent's kid deserves to be on the end of an inadequate teacher? Because the teacher's got to teach somebody. So whose kid is deserving of being inadequately taught? And of course, we all know that the answer to that is no one. And so therefore, if you know that there is something that's there, it must be addressed somehow or other. And hopefully, you're right, it might end up in, here's some more professional learning, here's some coaching that we're going to give you, here's some supports, and it all comes good. And then other times, it ends up in tears before bedtime. Now, both of those have at the core of them, how are we going to get a situation where this student or this group of students is actually in a constructive and positive and respectful learning environment with a competent teacher who's doing some great things? Now, that's as simple as it is. But in reality, as you've already identified, it's actually really hard to do, especially at this time of year when people are starting to think about, who's going to be teaching what class, what teacher do we need to replace, people getting promotions, et cetera, et cetera. It's the never-ending chessboard moving around.
Should we wander back to the reservation?
Let's go. I'm in your hands. I thought the whole topography project was just go wherever.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Dr. Paul Kidson and also enjoyed this special preview of Dear Stardust. Find it wherever you get your podcasts.
Dear Stardust.
Dear Stardust.
Dear Stardust.
Dear Stardust.
Dear Stardust.
Dear Stardust.
Dear Stardust 2125. I am long gone. My words, though, survive, coming down through the years from Fitzroy, the bluestone cottage that brought me joy and a feeling of something like home. A letter, perhaps, more a poem about family and love and all the things in a life that rise and fall. My children's children are at the stage of their own farewells, a special age that affords them memories, a grace that flows at a much more serene pace than earlier days permitted, when young heads wrestled with complication and their doubts and the rush of the new. I trust they will have passed on to you as much as was needed to live well and do deeds both worthwhile and noble. I hope also that you have found your own way to leave a gorgeous mark for the Stardusts that will, in time, succeed you in our family line. They need you to dream of making things happen, and to show them again and again how to give more often than you take, how to be true when much is at stake, how to shine when all around is grey, how to be sure when others are fey, how to laugh and sing and cook and bake, how to turn their fumbling hands to make beautiful things that are a delight for those who worry by day and night about all that is wrong and ugly. Remember that my three progeny carried on our line in their own bent, regardless of my too strong intent. They and your namesake made their choices, and they left behind for you traces of who they were, who we are, precious stardust, our present continuous. They did what they thought was for the best. They were in equal measure both blessed and burdened by our joined up songline. The diagnosis may be benign or malignant. You must set your course and do what you can in turn to source the wit and the will and the wisdom to thrive in an orderly and random times. Forgive and then be forgiven. Teach what matters to your own children. Share knowledge of the world and beyond. Show how to earn a place to correspond with all through an open mind and heart. To learn both their skillful craft and art, and stand up for that which really counts for their souls, not just their bank accounts. Prepare them to keep a house that's warm and safe and kind and able to form them and their own as a fellowship bonded tight by enduring hardship and celebrating together those good times that roll around. For who knows? There will always be troubles of our own making that lurk in a dark hour. Who we become, us and you and me, and how we get there from who we be is how the gentle flame stays alight. We belong and grow, do good and right, for this is what we have always done and should always do, and have some fun, dear Stardust, for life's an adventure and we can never be fully sure about what's around the next corner. You are enough to rise, to conquer your fears, to carry our hope forward in your smile and eyes and your words wherever you go, both near and far. All my love, your great, great, great grandpa.
Dr. Phil Cummins, thank you so much for your letter, and thank you so much for joining us on Dear Stardust.
Oh, Michael, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for the invitation to both contribute a letter and be here today. I'm so chuffed.
I just want to know, can you please introduce me to Stardust?
Stardust in our family is my second son, Oliver, his fiancée, Anastasia. Our pet name, our nickname for her is Stardust, and that comes from my mother, who's 93 years old, Roma. Just won the Jean Arnott Award for contribution to the community, which is an amazing thing. But anyway, she named Stardust, and so in the letter that I've written, the poem that I've written in the form of a letter, this is Stardust 2125. So I'm assuming that this is Anastasia 100 years from now, not the current Anastasia, but Anastasia 3-4 generations hence.
It's beautiful. There's a sense of coziness and familiarity. The second we hear your voice in the letter, there's a sense of knowing that person in some way, shape or form already with the way you write, with the way you speak. And you actually start by telling us all about your Bluestone Cottage there in Fitzroy. Can you tell us about where that place is?
Sure can. It's in Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung country, the greatest suburb in the world of Fitzroy. I discovered Fitzroy when I was in my early 20s, and it just seemed like the best place in the world to me. This wonderful collision of life and history and music and art and food and people and everything. And when my marriage finished in 2008, I needed a place to live. And by 2011, one day, I just was driving along looking for what I thought was an apartment, and I saw a for sale sign on this beautiful 1861 bluestone cottage on Napier Street, and called up the agent, made an offer, and 15 minutes later the place was mine. So I've had it now for about 15 years, and it's the only place I've ever really felt like home. I speak to that in the letter. I spent most of my life trying to work out what home and belonging mean for me, but that's it now. It's a modest little place. We love it there. Yeah, it's the second half of my life.